What's good, YouTube? It's me, your boy Squiddy, back again with another video. And today we want to talk about something that shocked the entire Yu-Gi-Oh community nearly 10 years ago at one specific YCS event. That's right, this was a special ruling that pertained only to that specific event happening at the YCS Middlelands in New Jersey in 2013. This was the first event, the first premier event where the Hidden Arsenal floor became legal, and with it were the meta-defining archetypes in the form of EVILSWARM and to an extent CONSTELLAR, but not really until after this event. Essentially, some of the new cards that came in this pack included cards like EVILSWARM CASTOR and EVILSWARM OPHION, which were pretty powerful in that metagame, given that OPHION had this destructive continuous effect that prevented either player from special summoning level 5 or higher monsters, which included quite a bit of the existing good meta decks at the time, including decks like Heretic, which were just completely locked out by this card. And with it was this card, EVILSWARM CASTOR, that was released in the set. Its effect was during the turn this card was normal summoned, you can normal summon one EVILSWARM monster in addition to your normal summon or set, and you can only gain this effect once per turn. Now, at the time, Konami just came out with some problem-solving card text, which somehow caused more problems than they were intended to solve for, but that's besides the point. This problem-solving card text was made so players would not get confused with rulings, and so rulings would be made in a consistent manner, given that cards were written the same more or less, which is kind of funny how this problem occurred. At that exact event, they ruled that EVILSWARM CASTOR and CONSTELLAR POLLUX, both of which have the same text for EVILSWARM or CONSTELLAR respectively, only existed as continuous effects, meaning that cards like Effect Veiler, Fiendish Chain, Skill Drain could easily negate them, when that was definitely not the case for the exact card, because this card was already legal in the OCG and the decks were extremely good. These effects are special effects that do not activate, nor are they continuous. The moment the summon is successful, they apply and provide the turn player with the additional normal summon or set. Now, the reason why the judges ruled it that way was because of the existence of another card at the time, which was the Dverg of the Nordic Alfar, which was one of the only cards that has a similar text, almost nearly identical to the text of CONSTELLAR POLLUX and EVILSWARM CASTOR, except for like one, I think it was a past tense. It says, during the turn this card is normal summoned as opposed to was. You can normal summon one Nordic monster in addition to your normal summoner set. You can only gain this effect once per turn. But this card, for some reason, was a continuous effect, so could be negated by Skill Drain or Veiler, so on and so forth. The players argued that the existence of another card called Dodger Dragon, which had a similar text, it said, your opponent could not activate counter trap cards to turn this card as normal summoned. There was actually an exclusive rule in the Extreme Victory rulebook, which is the pack that this card came in, that said that Dodger Dragon applied immediately when it was summoned, and it could not be negated by Skill Drain or Veiler or Fiendish Chain, unless, of course, Skill Drain was already on the field, which also applies to both of these cards. Now, the reason the judges ruled it, which they actually ruled it, they had every right to do so, because of the fact that we had a precedent in the form of Dverg, the Nordic Alfar. So, essentially, they ruled at that event in the player meeting that both CASTOR and POLLUX could be negated by Fiendish Chain or Veiler, which were very popular cards in the format at that time, given that there were decks like Mermail, Fire Fist, decks that already played these cards to begin with because they were already good in the metagame. So they announced this, obviously, on Friday. If you asked, the head judges probably tell you, so you could switch decks in time, because at the time, you could still submit your deck recipes on Saturday morning before the round 1 started. But the people that didn't check beforehand, they only learned that after they submitted their deck lists and were playing EVILSWARM at the event on the morning of Saturday at the players meeting were in for a rude surprise. Needless to say, suddenly their deck was being countered by, like Effect Veiler Phoenix Chain. And, having CASTOR stopped essentially meant your turn ended because that deck had no extenders at the time. You just played a bunch of traps and then your EVILSWARM engine. As opposed to this not being able to be stopped by Veiler, you could easily go into OPHION, which when slapped with a Veiler or a Phoenix Chain does not hurt as much because you can protect it with an Infestation spell or trap card. Well, I guess you could do that in the case of CASTOR as well against Phoenix Chain, but more so Veiler, because EVILSWARM Ophion is a continuous effect, so on your opponent's turn, it would still apply. And obviously having a 2550 huge body on board is a lot better than just having a 1700 body on board. And, well, it did kind of spread out to the tournament results a little bit as well. You can see here that in the results, the top 32, there were only 2 EVILSWARM decks because possibly due to that ruling and the fact that, Veilers were probably running rampant as well as Phoenix Chains on CASTORs. So that did kind of hurt the deck a little bit. And you can see here, there was actually a CONSTELLAR deck that almost made it as well. They were in 33rd or to 64th, which means they went X3, possibly losing on the bubble, maybe due to a Veiler as well. And there were actually a lot of people obviously complaining online about it, and that led to Konami releasing an article addressing the issue, which is no longer on their site. I guess it was archived and then they somehow switched servers, so it was gone. But I did find this Reddit post that did have the entire text copied down. This was announced after the weekend after the YCS happened in the Middlelands, and I think one of the Konami representatives, I believe it's Jerome or someone else, actually explained why it was ruled that way and kind of gave justification for the problem-solved text being, they kind of admitted that the problem-solving text was not as problem-solving as they intended it to be, so there's something that they would work on in the future. But of course, the judge staff had every right to rule it that way because they had a precedent. It's like if you go to court, you have a precedent for a similar case, you would take that ruling to heart and then apply it to the best of your ability to, the existing conditions, because of the fact, like if a card is ruled that way and the text is virtually the same, they have every right. You should use a precedent instead of using a possible ruling that exists in the OCG that does not really apply to the TCG. So, it wasn't really like them out to get the players or anything. It was just them ruling it in a way that was cohesive and consistent with the integrity of the game. But I just wanted to quickly go over that with you guys to show you a little bit about Yu-Gi-Oh! History and just like some of the craziest rulings that have happened in this time, given that this ruling just came out of nowhere and shocked a lot of people, especially on the day of the tournament. So that's one thing you should keep in mind. If you're ever unsure about your rulings, definitely ask about them on the Friday before you turn in deck list if they happen to change it later. I know you have to submit deck list now, I think on the morning of Friday, if I'm not mistaken. But it's always good to check your rulings beforehand. There's also a Facebook group called the Judges Lounge, which is like an unofficial Konami. It's not related to Konami, but it's a lot of judges that have been in the judge program that answer your ruling questions, and they're very, very good about it. So if you ever have a ruling question, definitely ask it in there. You can see me. I'm always popping in and out asking questions because it's always good to know every possible ruling, no matter how niche it is for your deck, if you're going to play in a competitive tournament, because it will come up sooner or later. So yeah, if you guys like this video, comment down below what you think is some of the craziest rulings that have happened in the history of the game or in your own experience. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Ciao.